Calvin Castine here at the Clinton County Fair offices in Morrisonville, New York. And we've got a gentleman with us that's no stranger to hometown cable viewers, Mr. Bill LaPage. And Bill, we're here to do a history of the county fair. Is that true?
That's true. And we're coming up on our 55th annual Clinton County Fair, and I have four gentlemen here with me that are they're probably the most knowledgeable people in the county about the Clinton County Fair, and I'll introduce them as we go along. And they're here to talk about the history of the fair, and hopefully we don't spellbound them, because they're long in years. But anyway, well, I would certainly like to thank Calvin and Hometown Cable for doing this. This is an annual thing that he does, and it's always been a great help to us in promoting the fairs. And while I'm at it, before I forget it, I want to just mention that this program is free to us, and Calvin accepts donations to keep his company going, and also his yearly memberships are still in effect. So anything you can do to help Calvin along that line, he and myself, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, that's unsolicited request there from Mr. Bill LaPage. Bill LaPage is, whether he knows it or not, is a very important part of the history of hometown cable. Back in June of 1977, the last program that Bob Venn did for What's Going On Here was an interview right here at the county fair with Bill LaPage.
Yeah. And
then a month later, the first program that Gordy Little did for Our Little Corner was right here at the Clinton County Fair, and again, Mr. Bill LaPage, and they talked nonstop for 42 minutes before moving.
That's right. Yeah, I had forgot about the second one, but I remember Bob's final show, and I do remember Gordy coming up here, but I didn't know it was the first one that he had done. Well, geez, that's a great honor.
Yeah, as it worked out, you were the link between the late Bob Venn, my very good friend, who died about 24 hours after doing the show with Bill. And then when I brought the tape down for Bill to the fair, I hadn't thought of what I was going to do to replace Bob Venn. I had no plans to replace Bob Venn, but he died suddenly, and I knew I had to do something to keep the legacy going that Bob had established with What's Going On Here. And at that time, Gordy Little had left the radio business and hadn't yet been hired as a probation department for the Clinton County. So I approached Gordy to see if he'd be interested in doing a weekly program and expanding it beyond our normal scope and bring it into the Clinton, Essex, and Franklin County area and beyond once in a while. And he jumped at the idea, and the first show we did was right here at the county fair. So,
well, you couldn't have made a better choice of a helper. I'll tell you, he was able replacement for Bob. But what you said about Bob before, he was probably one of the most liked people in Clinton County, and because everybody knew Bob. And, of course, everybody knows Gordy also. So, like I said, it was a very good replacement.
I figure I've picked from the same tree when I've got Bob Venn and Gordy Little.
There you go.
They're both irreplaceable, and they're unique but similar in so many ways because of their friendliness, their at ease in front of the mic, and the way they make people feel at ease.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, today I don't have anybody. Gordy's in Scotland enjoying a vacation with his wife, Kay, and his son, GR, and GR's wife, and they're enjoying themselves in Scotland. So I needed somebody, because I'm going to be running the camera. I needed somebody who would run this microphone before to sit down here with some gentlemen and do the history. So years ago, when Bob wasn't available, Bill LaPage had grabbed the microphone and did was it Carla Walenda? Is that who it was?
Yeah, the High Wire Act. Yeah, I remember her very well. Yeah, Carla Walenda. That was her name. You got a better memory than I have. Yeah, that was pretty good.
So Bill did the able job there interviewing Carla Walenda, and now we're going to see how good he is here as we do this tape with doing some of the history of the Clinton County Fair now in its 55th consecutive year. And of course, are we going to talk about previous fairs? Because obviously you pick up 1,800 newspapers and you hear about the county fair. And I know Ron Venn did a little diorama of the the county fair when it was on Bailey Avenue.
Yep, right. Mhm.
So there were other county fairs before. You're going to cover that with your gentlemen?
We're going to go back to when we started, and we like Kermit Irwin is on the original board, and he's one of the people here this morning. And we started the fair in 1954 on the Moffett Road up in just north of Plattsburgh. And then we ended up going to Sharon, or to right across the Route 9 from the base, where the proposed two car dealers are going to go, right there where it was set up before. And I'm sure we'll get into other fairs, because some of these guys have got some pretty funny stories, and they're talking to the press about it now, so we'll get them to talk about it on tape too.
Let's hope they're not all talked out. So
That's right.
Coming up right here, and this tape is also going to be shown on the fairgrounds. So if you're visiting the fair, stop in. You're going to have it in a booth, and the people watching it at the fair will know what booth it's in, but the people watching this on cable won't. So which booth will that be in? Which building?
It'll be in the old prison building. The prison decided not to cover as much as they usually do at the fair. That's Clinton Correctional Facility. And so they said they were only going to use half of their building this year. So that was a pretty good opportunity to set up a building with some fair memorabilia in it. And we thought that this tape, which we're going to play continuously all the time, and with the history of the fair for people to visit. Yep.
All right.
So that'll be the building is right next to the sheriff's satellite station.
Yeah, so it's right across from the fair office as you walk in, and be on the left.
Right there, yep. Mm-hmm.
All right, so
Very good.
If you're watching it at the fair, that's where you are, and if you're watching this at home, that's where this tape will be. Thanks,
True.
Bill.
Okay, Tom. Bye.
Before we turn it over entirely to Bill, we're just going to glance at some of the posters. Here's one from 1991 with the Ricky Skaggs show headlining the feature. This one here ran at the end of July through early August back in 1991. 1992 featured Joey Chitwood Thrill Show, the Sweethearts of the Rodeo, and Lionel Cartwright, along with Demolition Derby and some of the other regulars. The Pirates of the Mississippi were featured, along with the Hollywood Stunt Show and Monster Truck in 1993, and a big highlighter that year was Joe Diffie, country and western star Joe Diffie, the highlight of 1993. Certainly one of the biggest rock and roll acts ever to appear here, the Guess Who, were here in 1994, and Highway 101 also was here. The 1994 Clinton County Fair. The Guess Who were the big highlighters. Sticking with the rock and roll theme, the Vandells, America's #1 rock and roll review, highlighted the 1995 Clinton County Fair, along with the Ronnie Prophet Show and Neil McCoy, Atlantic recording star Neil McCoy, at the 1995 show. In 96, Jimmy Sturr and his orchestra, the Confederate Railroad, and some very popular local acts, including the Gibson Brothers. In 1997, the Vandells were back with their classic 50s and 60s, and Neil McCoy was back. Of course, the regulars again, the Tractor Pull and the Demolition Derby, were also highlighted. One of my favorite groups from the 60s, the Vogues, were in town in 1998, and Mark Chestnut was here for the country and western fans in 1998. 1998 also featured the Outdoor Obsession Tour with Tracy Bird, and this was a special edition during the fair.
I remember a person's face.
I believe that was actually 1999 would have been Tracy Bird, so let's correct that, 1999. The year 2000 saw Gary Lewis and the Playboys with This Diamond Ring, Count on Me, and Everybody Loves a Clown. Also, snowmobile drag racing was featured, a Toyota Hollywood Stunt Show, and Tracy Atkins for the country and western fans. 2001, the highlighter was Terry Clark, Mercury recording artist, performing a little gasoline, no fear if I were you, and you're easy on the eyes. And for the year 2002, there's the dates, July 23rd through the 28th. And the highlighter is Brad Paisley. Wrapped around, I'm gonna miss her. Two people fell in love, we danced, he didn't have to be, me neither. It's this year's highlighter, Brad Paisley.
Hey, on you if you keep this up.
Thanks, Cal. Again, we're out on the grounds now, and standing with me on my left here is the president of the fair, Bob Perrier, and he says I'm going to get fired for introducing him here, but I'm going to have him say hello anyway.
Good afternoon, good evening, whatever it's going to be. Right now we are in the morning, and appreciate you being here, and hopefully these gentlemen to my left can give you some insight to what we're looking for in regards to the history of the fair. Okay. Here, I got one eye closed.
Okay, and I'm on my left here is Ken Place. He is one of the people that I always go to when I need information about the fair or even some advice, everyday advice. This is one of the guys I go to, and on his left is Bernard Barber. By the way, Ken has been on the fair board for 42 years. Bernard is 32. How many years, Bernard? How many? 40 years. 40 years. He's been on the fair for 40 years. And off to Bernard's left is Kermit Irwin, who is one of the original, I think the only original member of the original fair board that's left. And that was in 1954 when you came on the board, Kermit?
I was here when it started, 48.
Or from 1948, I'm sorry, that's true. Okay. Well, anyway, we're going to walk around the grounds, and some of the buildings that you're going to be visiting or looking at will be one of the original barns in the fair. And, of course, we probably won't have the chance to see every one of them, but we'll take in as many as we can. Just a minute. Okay, this building here is what we call one of the community buildings where people set up to show their wares. And maybe Ken can tell us something about this building.
This building was built by the board of directors when they first took over the grounds, when they first moved up here.
That was in 1954.
Yeah.
1954, okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about that building?
No, it was just
one of the original buildings.
Just built for rental space for the community.
Okay, we'll go right up. Now this area here is a center court area, and this is where we have a lot of entertainment up in the gazebo, and people sit around on the stones here during the fair. It's one of the coolest spots in the fair, especially when the sun is out. Get under all the trees. This is our select area here, and we have you'll notice a stage in back of the gazebo that will have a lot of entertainment in that area too, plus being in the gazebo. Now right here, this building here is, well, it's a tip-top frame, but it's another exhibit building where people set up for booths. And I don't know when that building was built, but I'm sure one of these gentlemen can tell me. Bernard, do you remember when that building was built?
Ken, do you have any idea? That was
Well,
built
no,
that was in the 80s, I think.
It's one of the newer buildings.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
1980, 80
Yeah.
in the 80s anyhow.
Yeah. But we're coming to one of the real old buildings of the fair, which is the 4-H building, and I'm sure they have can tell you a lot about this building.
This building, this 4-H building was built in 3 sections, different years. And it was built by the 4-H Association.
I see.
They raised the money and did the work.
Oh, they raised all the money and did the work? Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I know what you mean by the 3 sections back there, because we still fill those up with storage every year. And there used to be a lot of poles in the way that prevented the storage, so we took them all out of there. But anyway, this is one of the real older buildings, and we've sort of renewed the front of it. About 3 or 4 years ago, we got a grant from somebody, and we did the whole front of this building over. And the next building in line here is the fireman's building. This was donated by somebody donated this building to the firemen. It was there used to be a bathhouse or one of the maintenance buildings on the old South Platte Street playgrounds, and it was donated to the Clinton County Firemen, and they moved it up here for that had to be in about 20 years ago they did that. And right next to that, I want to wait till the boys kept up with us. This is one of the original buildings on the fairgrounds right here. This is the FFA building, this yellow building right here. just
Bill, you gotta get this one over.
While we're here, Bill, these guys are kind of slow walkers. First of all, here we got to. Were they sprier in their younger days?
I think they were.
Okay.
So was I.
So let's talk a little bit too, as we're going from building to building, about how you ended up here and at the fairgrounds. Like you said, you had several other places, but you didn't automatically get here. You something happened to make this land available, and this is not a county-owned organization, is it? It's all.
It's a private corporation.
So maybe we can get into that too.
Yes, we lease the grounds from the county. We have a 99-year lease, and we are not supported by the county in any way, shape, or fashion, except through maybe some in-kind services, like we have sheriff's deputies up here during the fair. But the only thing we get from the county is in-kind services. And we've been here. This is, like I say, this is our 55th year. We started here in 1954, but the fair was originated in 1948. And by the way, this is my 18th year here. But anyway, this barn here is what from what I understand, it was the original cattle building, the cattle barn. And then, but when the new cattle barn was built, which is right next to it, it was built. This barn was converted to the FFA. Was named for the FFA building. And Ken wants to say something about this one also.
This was built in 61.
1961.
By the group of cattle people who got together.
It was the original cattle building.
It was the original cattle
That's
building.
what I thought. Yeah.
It was A. Mason and Sons in Peru furnished the material and built the building.
Oh, I see.
The cattlemen footed the bill.
Okay.
One of the original buildings was
I'm told that one of the original buildings on the fair was probably the first food concession on the fairgrounds was by the Scholar Falls Methodist Church, was it? Methodist Church, yes. And now it belongs. Now they just changed religions. Now it's St. John's Academy now. So, okay. And next to that is our Grange building. The Grange used to be a pretty popular item at the fair, but over the years, it just the different groups started to die, and not die out, but just fade out. Weren't active anymore. So we decided to. There was only one unit left about 5 years ago, and we decided to do away with the Grange department at all, and then we use it for exhibits of flowers and farm and garden, culinary, and the home bureau. And it's really a nice building when it's set up. It's really it looks like an antique building. It's a log building on the front, but the inside of it is logs for roof rafters and everything. It's really a unique building. And then these were all the next restaurant here. That was one of the original restaurants also. And right here, this building with all the garages in it is this is spaces that we rent to vendors to show their wares, and that is one of the more popular exhibit areas because we never have a problem running those garages. Okay. Yep.
That was built in two sections. This half was built original. That's the original. The building 16, the exhibitor building, that was built, I believe, in 1961. Half of it. Then that's when I started exhibiting in booth 5 the following year. I was made a director, and the other half was built, and I had the only space that went right straight through the building.
Okay. I'll stay. Okay, well now we're coming up to the cattle barn now. This is the biggest building at the fairgrounds. We use this for, what do we call it, a multi-purpose building. People will rent this building, tool sales, bazaars, or tent sales and stuff like that. And inside this building, there's really a lot of room in there, and it's a very popular building. And now the cattle entries are down somewhat in the years. Of course, we've lost a few farms in the county, and the place space was at a premium there when I first started here. It sort of dropped out, but this year the entries have picked up quite a bit. So we're looking for a good show in the cattle barn this year. on now. Yeah, these open spaces that we're standing in front of now, we use these areas, we set up food vendors, flea market, some flea market people, and the grounds are usually filled every year with these outside. Most of the people seem to like the outside spaces for exhibits because they feel they get more of people coming by their buildings, and which is true. That's the true. Okay. Now, this Ward Lumber Building, that's the person who sponsors it, the company that sponsors it. It's one of the more popular exhibit buildings on the grounds. We have about 30 spaces, 10 by 10 spaces, and people can rent, vendors can rent 10 by 10s or 10 by 20, depending on how much space they need. But it's usually, it's one of the first buildings that we fill in a way, inside space in a way. Okay, this building here is the North Country Squares. It's a food concession, and we've been. This was built here in the 70s by the North Country Square Dance Club, which also has a building on the grounds for their club activities. And if we look to the left, we can see the area where the carnival sets up, where we have 4 blacktop roads running through the carnival, and the unique thing about those roads, according to everybody that I talked to in the fair business, if it rains, the rides stop, but just as soon as the rain stops, the rides start in again because of the tarmac walkways, and it doesn't hold up the fair at all. And this is probably the only one in the state that has that kind of an activity, paved grounds in the carnival area. And then panning back to the right, there's another exhibit building. We have 8 garages and that blue and white building there. This is what I call, this corner right here is what I call Broadway and 42nd Street. This is the business area of the fair, right in here. And we see, as you can see, we have a number of food concessions along this walkway also. And those eight garages there are I would say are the first ones that are gone when we open up, when we start sending out contracts and asking for contracts. This will be the first building that's filled right here because of the activity. We're between here and the grandstand, which is the busiest area of the fairgrounds.
Now, do people have first choice if they rented it last year?
They always do. That's the way it's always been operated. People were here last year. If they come back, they don't even have to leave a deposit, but we will take the deposit. But if they say they're coming back next year, we'll send them a contract, and if the contract is not back by a certain date, then they've lost it, but ordinarily they're back. This is a new restaurant right here. This is by the Town of Plattsburgh Republican Party right here. They're going to be selling ice cream and all kinds of ice cream treats. So anyway, these are the kind of buildings that we like. We'll put up a building for people. And they pay for it over a number of years, but that's the way we've done it in the past. But this year, this building was paid before we built it, so it sort of relieves our financial situation when we do it that way.
Now, are they committed for a number of years, or how does that work? That just renting the site, they now have.
No, they've paid for the building, but once if they decide not to rent it again next year. That building, even though they paid for the materials and we built it, the building belongs to us, and they give us a stipend for whatever the stipend is for a food concession. They pay us that every year, and like I said, if they leave, they can't take the building with them. It's ours, and you'll never get a permanent deed to a building on this grounds. Right now, there's an engine thing on, gasoline engine show. I don't know if you want to. Okay, we're standing right in front of the old Maple Sugar building, and the Maple Sugar people a couple of years ago decided for lack of interest on the help on their part, did not want to come back. So we converted that we got permission from the county to sell beer, and they gave us permission under certain conditions, and one of the conditions was it had to be in a confined area. And they can't take the beer out on the ground, so this is what we're doing here in this building here. And you'll see off to the left is just a little area they can go outside with the beer, but they stay inside the fence. Now all this other space back here, where open space is usually filled with maybe food concessions or food or other types, all kinds of vendors, tool shows and stuff like that. And you'll see there's people selling tickets to a show on the grounds in the front of the grandstand. This is a gasoline engine show. And we, since May 15th, we've had something on the grounds for just about every weekend that right up till now. Like we've had tool sales, we've had horse shows. People have even been here on camporees, a whole bunch of we've had people camping here all weekend. We have about 160 full hookup campsites that can be used. And as you see, there's like this show is going on in front of the grandstand now. And over across the track, you'll see our stage is where we hold all our main shows. And the grandstand, we can seat approximately, with this bleacher section, we can seat approximately 2,800 people here in front of the grandstand. In the grandstand, we can seat them comfortably. But during the weekend, during the week of the fair, probably the Saturday night and Sunday are probably the biggest days at the grandstand. Of course, on Sunday is the Demolition Derby, which is always a big sellout. We don't have to promote that very much. It promotes itself.
We have 2 demolition derbies, don't
Yeah,
you?
this year we are having a ladies' demolition, powder puff derby we're calling it, on Wednesday night. This is new this year, and we're hoping that it's successful. I mean, we had enough requests to have it, so I'm sure it'll be a success. And then on Friday night, now right in front of the grandstand here, we'll be having our annual tractor pull and 4-wheel drive, which is always popular. We have the Adirondack pullers here, and so they put on a hell of a show, really nice show. And then on Saturday, of course, is Brad Paisley. He's going to be on that stage, and right in front of that stage, that's where we set up. We'll be setting up about 1,500 seats right here, and as of right now, we've got about 40 seats left. But they'll all be set. And then the grandstand itself, that's from the fence to the stage where we set up all these seats. And then in the grandstand, like I said, it can comfortably hold about 28 people, and hopefully it'll be full. But like I say, we've sold mostly all the reserve seats right now. And then on Sunday, of course, is our Demolition Derby. And on Wednesday night, we're having a battle. Just a moment, please. On Tuesday, we're having something that we hadn't had in a long time. We're having a battle of the bands. And we have a good number of bands that have already asked to participate. And on Wednesday is what's
Ladies Powder Puff Derby.
yeah, that's right. The Powder Puff Derby on Wednesday. On Thursday is American Grease. That is a 50s and 60s show, which the music that for those people, we always have one type of those shows for different people here that come to the fair because of they don't all go for rock and roll or for country western. They like that early 60s music. And then on Friday, like I said, the tractor pull. On Saturday is Brad Paisley, and on Sunday then the big Demolition Derby show. One thing I forgot to mention in front of the grandstand, we're having on Tuesday and Wednesday of the fair week, we have harness racing. That's always a pretty popular event that goes on in the daytime. And then on weekend, starting on Thursday we'll be having a 4-H horse show over in the horse ring, which is directly standing in back of the buildings there in front of us. And on Friday we'll have what we call the English horse show, and on Saturday we have the Western horse show. So there's activity. I always, when people ask me what goes on here, I'll say there's things going on all the time. There's something happening all the time at the fairground, some sort of entertainment to keep people busy and occupied. Now, right straight, where we're looking straight here, we see a log cabin affair being built. That's what our new EMS building, that's Emergency Services Building. And the reason we're building it back here is because when we have an emergency during the fair, the ambulance would have to back up or drive in through an awful lot of people up in the front of the fair. So we just thought that a building out of the way where the ambulance could back right in and we could bring the patient to that building from any place in the fair, and the ambulance could back in without having to worry about backing over people. So that's not quite completed, but it will be done before the fair starts. And then, by the way, all that lumber was donated by a certain individual for that building, and we're just putting it up at...
They're putting it up themselves.
Though they are doing it themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
EMS is putting it up.
I see. Okay. So that building is completely free to us, and I'm always in favor of that. Okay, we're sitting in the court area in front of the gazebo, and then in front of us is a stage, but in back of us is a gazebo, and this is where we have a lot of entertainment daily going on at all times. And Bernard, I have Ken Place and Bernard Barber here with me, and I'd like to see if they could tell us some stories about the fair, funny or historical, whatever kind of stories they'd like to tell. We'd like to hear it. So, Ken, you were president of the fair, I hear, one time, and for 2 years, and the board members told you what your job was going to be. So, would you mind telling us that?
When I was first put on as third vice president, I inquired a little bit about what the job was, and they said the vice president is supposed to in charge of the vice, check out the carnival. That was all the instructions I ever got.
Well, could you tell me, did you ever have any success at rooting out the vice? Or not?
I didn't work too hard at that job.
There wasn't anything there. Well, anyway, that's a really good one. Brenner, you have any stories about anything that's over a number of years that, especially maybe when beer was illegal on the ground? I could tell you a few stories about that, but I'd like to hear you tell some about anybody that was illegally drinking on the grounds and what we did with them.
Well, the illegal drinking was handled by the Sheriff's Department or the State Police, and there was some, but for the amount of patrons and the amount of beer that was handled, I would say there were very few problems. And naturally, at that time, the drinking laws were not, and the driving laws weren't as strict as they are now, and people were drinking more. Today, where you'd come in and get one beer and go along to your business, at that time you'd probably drink 10. And the majority of the people at that time handled it. If we felt that they weren't capable of having any more beer, we'd tell them, and most generally that was the end of it.
Yeah. And
monetarily, on average year, we'd gross about, we'd net approximately $10,000 from the beer concession. I was in charge of the beer concession.
Well, they had a perfect guy doesn't even drink.
For years.
But I've had when the beer was not allowed on the grounds, there's been a lot of times that people would come and tell me there's people drinking, and I'd get a couple of deputies to go with me, but the best one that I can recall was the people were complaining about two people bothering them in the parking lot. So I took a couple of deputies on with me, and the only people I found were two men sitting in a car. And we looked in the car, and there was about 3 cases of beer in the back seat of that car. And so the sheriffs had them get out, and they couldn't hardly stand. And when they saw the sheriff, the sheriff said, "What do you want to do with the beer bill?" And I said, they can't drink it. And I said, they certainly can't drive. If they drive, somebody's going to be out there who's going to arrest them. And so we ended up dunking every one of those cans of beer one at a time on the ground, and those 2 guys were actually crying when they saw that beer running out and running on the ground. So that's the funniest part of that one. But anyway, we let them stay on the grounds, and I made sure that I took them up to the first restaurant and got them some black coffee and helped them to sober up a little bit before they could go home. But do you know, can you remember anything back at the years when some of our bad years when we had to go to the bank and beg for a loan and to try to get us out of the hole?
Yeah, it was a known fact when you were elected president that for years that about the first thing you'd done, at least in the first 3 months, you went down to the bank and signed a note to pay the insurance bill from the previous year, most generally.
Boy.
And expenses from the previous year.
We was always in debt. We always had a note at the bank of some kind.
Yeah, but I found that I can see why we're doing well now is because most of the board members are pretty conservative, and which is good for the fair because they know what the fair needs, but they're not going to spend all kinds of money just to get it done. They're going to make sure it works, at the time.
When I was first on the fair road, the county board of supervisors it was at that time give the fair association in between $10,000 to $12,000 a year to operate with, and we could always pushing that as a payment for the
Right.
the bank. We knew we had that coming, regardless of what the fair did.
Yeah. Well, I was I was on the legislature, and that was we were what is known as a contract agency with the county, and we got something in the neighborhood of $18,000 a year. But when things started to get tight with the county too, and they had to find, instead of raising taxes to keep up all these contract agencies, they decided to look them over and see which one was really which ones were needed and which ones weren't. So we were phased out of that funding in 5 years, as I recall, and but now we went to the county about maybe 5 or 6 years ago to do a tape for the state on our fifth, I think on our 50th anniversary. We had that done, and they paid for that tape. Of course, I don't blame them for paying for it, because 3/4 of the tape was all about the county. There wasn't very much about the fair. So anyway, anything else?
Well, about what has aided us financially in the last few years is the storage. If it wasn't for the storage, we probably would have to be a little bit more conservative. You wouldn't see the buildings in the shape that they are, or the grounds, because we just plain couldn't afford to do it. Your premiums have increased. Agriculture, naturally, in Clinton County is a small item compared to what it was 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And your premiums, we have to pay larger premiums. I guess everything falls into line, but one of the lifesavers here is the storage.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Our biggest money maker is the front gate, and then the second is the grandstand, and the third is the storage. And it's unbelievable, but every one of these buildings that we can get anything into is filled with storage. And it's unbelievable how that, when I first became manager, I think we took in something, I'm not going to quote any figures, but it wasn't very much. But then we started doubling up in the fair. Instead of one lane, we'd put 2 and 3 lanes in each building, and over the years we filled it, and we have to turn people down now, because if we had room for more campers, we could fill 2 barns up with campers. But we can't just plan on storage all the time when we spend money. We have to work good for the whole fair. But like you said, storage is a big help, and it's probably pulled us right out of the red every year, for sure.
About the fair is the grounds were high and dry. I can only remember one year that we had a mud problem here getting the carnival and the concessions in.
Yeah.
Even though we do get a lot of rain sometimes, our grounds are very
They're tip top.
good.
They're in tip top shape. There's no question. We have the groundskeeper Don Duquette, and he's in charge of getting these grounds in shape. And every year, they look better and better every year. So there's no problem, no question about that. But you touched on back was about 6 or 7 years ago, where we had to we used every town in the Clinton County that used their trucks hauling sand in here to get the carnival set up. It was so muddy that we just couldn't get anything going, and the state wouldn't certify them safe unless we hauled all that stuff in with bulldozers and trucks of sand. It was unbelievable. But we ended up getting started. We were about an hour and a half late getting the carnival going that year. I remember that. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. But
kept a tractor in the parking lot to tow the cars out if they got stuck.
I guess we did. We did that for the whole week. We had people towing people out. That's for sure. So Bernard, I know you've been ill the last few weeks, but you're looking pretty good. But anyway,
We'll be here for another fair, I think.
Well, I hope you are anyway. But
I'll be here as far as I know, for the demolition derby and the tractor pull. And
that's your assignment.
And our new event, the ladies demolition derby.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
We talked about that.
And one thing we have that very few fairgrounds have, we have a paved area for the carnival.
Yeah, I told him about that.
You did tell them about that? Right.
I told him, yeah, that's when it rains, the rides stop. When the rain stops, the rides go.
Yeah.
And it's unique to any fair in New York State. So it's a good part of the fair. All we have to do is get the people here to
and more
use the
generally, any visitors, are amazed at the condition of and the appearance of the fairground. That's one of the compliments that we've gotten for a number of years, is the appearance of our fairgrounds.
And then when you're watching the horse shows down here, you can, if you look due west, you see the Adirondack Mountains and the woods all the way around. And so it's probably the most picturesque grounds. I think it is personally. I think it is the most picturesque grounds in the state fairgrounds, and the cleanest. There's no doubt about the cleanest. But anyway, I mean, if you go to the state fair, if it rains down there, it's a calamity, you know. So up here it's not. So anyway,
I think one of the overlooked things that goes on here is the fair is the harness racing. We have it for 2 days. It's an afternoon event. It don't draw a lot of people, but we do have some good races, some good horses here, and we have a good track. When you see some of the tracks at these other county fairs, you wonder how they race.
That's right. Yeah, and we used to have 3 days of racing, as you remember, and but with the onset of OTB drawing the people away from the tracks, we had to cut back to 2 days, and I think this year will be pretty well.
Also, the lack of entries is one of the main factors.
Well, the lack of yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But we usually manage to get the 2 days in anyway, and so.
Younger generation is going to stock cars instead of horses.
Well, we have that on Sunday, so. Anyway, Murder?
Well,
As we're getting ready to wrap this up, this tape that we're doing is going to be one part of the fair of the museum that we're building, and we'd like to request anybody that has any fair memorabilia that they would loan us for the fair or permanently install it in the fair. We'd appreciate it, and if they don't want to leave it here, we'd say they got it back. And anyway, we'd like to close, and I'd like to thank Calvin, and of course I got to thank the 3 guys that have been helping me out here, Bernard and Ken and Kermit. But we hope that everybody out there will take advantage of their fair this year, because I've always considered the fair a place to renew acquaintances and make new friends, and it's a unique thing. And ever since I've been here, I came here as a manager, but I look forward to this every year. I'm not the manager anymore, but I still look forward to it, and we hope that we hope that people will take advantage of this thing, because it's one of the unique things in the county. Even though there's a lot of entertainment in the county, but the more entertainment I've always thought there is, the less problems there is in the rest of the county. So, Calvin, we'd like to thank you, and I wish Gordy was here. I'm sure he would have done a better job of doing all this stuff here. But still, we appreciate it, and like I asked at the beginning of the program, I hope that people will take advantage of memberships in Calvin's organization and any donations that he gets, because he needs a little bit of money to keep this service going to the community. So, thank you, Bernard.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, thank you.
And thank you, Kermit, wherever you are. And Bob, too. Bob, the president, was here all during this thing. But thanks again. And a good day, and we hope to see you all at the fair.